JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to Captain's Log, my podcast that's geared towards those that are in the tax business, providing these services, CPAs, EAs, tax pros. Whether you own a practice or not, this is where we're going to focus in. Really aren't going to go through tax tips and the latest, and here's how we save our clients dollars. You have lots of resources for that, one of which is my continuing professional education and my monthly tax update through my CPE program, which you've got a link to that. Here's where I want to dive in though is this for me, not just practice management, but I'm coming to you as a firm owner. I'm a CPA, I've had my own practice over 27 years. I've had 31 years in the business. And so I'm now coming from a direction of how does, after listening to this podcast, you pick up something that, quite frankly, makes your life better, right? Now, is it going to cause you to now, be able to fly and leap tall buildings in a single bound and all that stuff, change your life in that regard? No. But maybe feeling a little bit less alone, maybe feeling a little more encouraged that you can actually have a practice that meets your needs. But one of the things I want to focus in on today is expectation of clients. And the other thing, and I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm basing this on other seminars that I've looked at. But part of what we're looking at here is expectation of clients to then match your expectations. So guess where it starts? What are your expectations? What are your expectations? So here's my expectations. Now I'm getting ready to tell you something, and I want you to just keep listening. But here's my expectations, and listen to me fully, promise. Here's my expectations. I want to work 7 days a week. I want to basically work from about 7 a.m. to maybe about 8 p.m. I want to wake up about 2 a.m. and do a good 3 hours of sleep to about 5 a.m., get a few more hours of sleep, get back in the office by 7 a.m. I want my day to be really driven by who just called, who just emailed, who just showed up. I really want to be so busy that I can't even look at my AR. That would be really basically a sign of success for me. I have so much going on. I can't organize. My desk is a mess. I don't know if we billed our clients on time. I don't even know last time we raised our rates. But by golly, I want to be that busy that I've got that much work going on. That's when I know I will have made it. So my expectations is that kind of practice. Now that's silly, isn't it? But guess what? Okay, right here. Now, did I sit down and probably pose it that way? And maybe you're lucky enough that you've not ever experienced that. And I didn't experience that necessarily all the years that I've had, but there were a number of years that seemed to be kind of all year, especially when I was a larger practice with over 13 people. Now it's just downsized and it's just me. But see, I had a health event that made me go, okay, so even though I wanted that, right? Even though that, like how silly did that all sound? Well, that's what I'm doing. Are you doing that? Were you doing that? I was doing it, right? Now, I never missed a baseball game, never missed a dance recital to my kids, right? But I want you to know this. I looked up and I'm 272 pounds, so I was 117 pounds heavier than I am right now in front of you. I had a stroke. I'm just going to be honest with you, even though it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Divorced, right? Now, I'd already been divorced several years at the time I had the stroke. Couldn't have been happier. I'm remarried. Life is so grand and wonderful. I can't tell you how peachy it all is. And when I had the stroke, it was wonderful, okay? So don't get through your head any judgments. Here's what I want you to hear. It was not until then, when having a life-threatening event and being in the hospital and unable to say two numbers backwards to the nurse, for me to go, maybe I need to think of this differently. What are my expectations? Well, some of these expectations I was told, as in the doctor in the stroke unit is saying, listen, if you don't change your ways, you'll be dead by April 15th. This was October 13th of 21. Anybody know what that was 2 days before? Yeah, October 15th deadline. Now, I don't know that I've said this publicly, but I actually had another mild stroke in the middle of tax season 2024. And you know when it was? It was 4 days before the March 15th deadline. But here's what I want you to note, is that when I had that stroke, I said, I'm going to have to now figure out what my expectations are for this practice. And then I've got to keep clients that are going to meet my expectations. And you ready for this? This is the one thing that I realized. That these would be clients that would require no boundaries. Can you imagine such a thing? I know about you, but used to have 2 phones and 2 different emails, and there was 3 emails, and then it was like, well, listen, if I'm in this part of the office, I can't be disturbed, and then emails are at this, and then an outgoing email certain times of the year to be like, now listen, I probably got it, but I'm going to have to, give me a couple of days to reply back to you, and then, oh, it's the weekend, or it's the morning, or it's this, and it's a text, and right? And then you start going, well, what can I do to put up boundaries? Why? So I can actually get work done. Why? Because that's what I'm here to do. So I had to look at setting, what are my expectations? And what are my expectations that a client's going to meet without me even asking? And that's where I had to do some very hard decisions, and I had to downsize a decent amount. And I had to let go of clients that at the beginning of the phase of figuring out the downsizing, the list that I initially came up with was drastically different than the actual list, because the first list was, oh, well, I can't get rid of this client, or they're huge, This client is $60,000 a year to me. Oh, this client's $30,000. Oh, this client's been a client since literally month 1 of my practice. Well, I couldn't do that. This is this person's, they're a friend of the friend, but it's this, or, well, I don't know who else would do those, or, right? And I had all this list. And then when I sat down with, I kind of put together this small group of people to basically check myself and go through, and I did need help, right? It's just not that far after the stroke. And really what came down to is, but are any of these clients, you're keeping them for the reasoning being that it's something about them? And I was like, well, yeah, this like right here. So I'm telling you, the client that is $60,000 a year, that was a pretty decent sized client. Probably my next biggest client was, is probably about 50 grand. And then the next biggest client might be 30. Next biggest, really just kind of jumped down. But most of my clients are around 6 to 8 grand a year, maybe 10 grand a year, right? All I'm saying is that 60 grand a year client always was in contact with me. And I didn't mind per se, but had high expectation, high demand, sometimes inappropriate, sometimes not that nice about it. But I would have said I consider them a friend, right? Like we did things socially, paid in advance, and had lots going on in their picture. And I had been working with them at the time. It would have been 23 years that I had been working with them. But one of the things that my wife pointed out to me is, she said, so who was it that 2 days after you were home from the hospital from your stroke needed to visit with you, and you weren't taking calls, you left your cell phone at the office, you didn't have a computer, so you weren't checking email, so you were completely isolated, right? So this is in a period of time of memory loss and, some issues. And came to your house and brought documents and sat with you to go through some questions that they had, and stayed for well over an hour. Now, they did bring, I don't even remember what it was, some kind of get well gift, and, something that was very nice. They in fact also brought a lunch, brought a couple sandwiches, right? So is that a client that's going to require boundaries? Yeah. Is that a client that's going to meet my expectations? So here's my point. What are my expectations? So here's what I landed on. My expectations are I don't want to work overtime. And in fact, what the stroke unit told me is if you continue to work overtime, as in for the rest of your life, you will die before April 15th of the tax season in which you are working overtime. And it is a fact. And you do need to lose weight. Like I told you, I was 272 pounds. Just sitting there, like wake up in the morning, just sitting there, my blood pressure for the longest time, easily 180 over about 120. Cholesterol's through the roof, right? On and on, right? So I did the downsizing, lost weight. I get blood work. I go to the doctor every 30 days. I carry an aspirin with me everywhere I go. If I'm not anywhere where my wife is, I wear a bracelet that says I'm a stroke potential person, right? This is serious stuff, right? So I did. I lost the weight, eating right, all this stuff, all of it, right? So it's like, whoa, sweet. But my point is that it wasn't that I had an expectation of not working overtime. I was told you can't work overtime anymore. How many people have jobs and they don't work overtime? Lots of people. And he said, so it doesn't matter that it's sometimes during the year. You can't ever do it. And you should check out my podcast on wellness. For whatever reason, people have been interested in my journey related to that. So I got a podcast where I talk about that. But cortisol ended up being a big issue with this second mild stroke. But it was this. I'm not going to work the weekends. I'm not going to work overtime. I'm leaving about 4:30. I'm not going to set an alarm clock. I'm not going to take a meeting before 10 a.m. I'm not going to start a meeting after 3:30 p.m. I'm not going to take a meeting on Monday. I'm not going to take a meeting on Friday. I'm not going to be on a phone talking to any clients on a Monday or a Friday afternoon. And by the way, I've got a brand new cell number that only my kids and my wife have. And at the time, no one else had it. No family, no other, I can't believe, don't worry about it. All I'm telling you is when you're recovering from a stroke, you don't sit around and worry about, well, what if this person needs to get a hold of me in California? Well, I do have a wife they can get a hold of, right? My point is, I needed to be with clients that just would respect that. I also wanted to be with clients that we had one tax deadline to worry about, not an extension deadline. Yes, we have a handful of clients that need extension because they're waiting on a K1, but they're done. I want to have clients that with that one deadline, we're pretty well done by the end of March. I want business clients that we have their tax returns done pretty much by the end of January because their books are done monthly or quarterly, and by about the second week of January, they're clean, they're ready to go. I'm kind of looking at my notes from when I had my stroke. They need to be inside a concentrated industry that, boy, I just know it like the back of my hand. And that they're within the scope of my services. So not going to do this and not going to do that. So it doesn't matter that 27 years ago I said, yeah, I'll show up and chop wood for you. And I've still been doing it. It's like, well, that's out of my scope. My expectation was I would be with clients that would require no follow-up. What does that mean? One request and we have it. Obviously, every once in a while, somebody misses it. So no overtime, no weekends, all tax returns done by one due date, really. So for business, March 15th or April 15th for the individual. And then the expectation is the rest of the year, we're doing planning. We don't need to do a lot except around the deadlines of quarterly estimates. They're inside my concentrated industry. They're within my scope of services. No follow-up is required, and no boundaries are required. And so that was then who we kept. And so it actually had nothing to do with the dollar amounts. Now, one of the other things that I did is, let me see what page it is here. And most would say, well, you got to go with the 80-20 rule. True, but here's what I looked at. It wasn't 80-20 of dollars. It was that 80-20 of time, right? So what clients really take up the least amount of time that are the same, profitability. So you then, if you have your expectations and you set those up and you have a current practice, then you go, well, who's going to fit this? Without a phone call, without having to explain it to them, without an email, without, well, it's going to be this and that, without, oh, well, for them, there's an exception. So if you do have a practice and you're trying to make these decisions, I think you also have to figure out what kind of practice are you. I think there's really 3 categories, because that's going to help you go, well, here's my expectations, but this type of practice I have, here's their expectations. And so do I actually now have an issue with, well, I want these expectations, but I don't have a practice that would even match that expectation. What am I talking about? 3 types of practices. Are you the fastest practice? Are you the cheapest practice? Or are you the best practice? Now, I get it. You'd all say, well, of course I'm the best practice. Well, of course you are. But what kind of clients, what expectations do they have? Because I can tell you this right now, we are not the fastest at all. I've never given in to pressure. We are not the cheapest by far. I'm now $500 an hour for my time. Now, just like you, I would say, well, I'm the best. But what am I the best at? I'm going to wrap up here in about 3 minutes. What am I the best at? If I were to tell you, here's what I think I'm the best at. You ready for this? And if you really should hear it all the way through. I'm the best at businesses that are owned by 1 or 2 individuals with 10 or less employees, with less than $1 million in gross revenue, that net roughly $150,000 to $200,000, of a professional that's providing a service in the medical or legal field that's been in business for at least 5 years, if not 10, that they use my favorite payroll company to do their payroll. They use QuickBooks. They do tax estimates regularly. That live in Oklahoma, that live near me, their practice is, and they've been a client of mine for at least 10 years. That's what I think I'm the best at. Did you notice the very last thing? Because probably I'm going to be better than you or anybody with the client I've been with 10 years. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that somebody else could take over my spot, so to speak, and do a better job eventually. But what is that? It's about the client interaction. And so other thing is I had to have an expectation that my clients, if I consider myself a boutique practice, their expectation then is, right, that this is going to be a really good, thorough service with somebody that's been with me a long time, that has a lot of value that's being brought into that. So with this, as I now narrowed my practice, I was so pleased. And everything I told you, all the expectations that I've had. So in 22 tax season, nailed it. 23 tax season, nailed it. 24 tax season, did not nail it, but it's because I had a mild stroke in the middle of tax season. So I'm doing well. It was not anything like the prior stroke in terms of my residual issues, but I'm going to visit more about my story as we move forward. The thing to note here is that I sure appreciate you tuning in. I hope you will tune in to other podcasts that I'm doing. Check out my CPE. If you missed episode 1 of Captain's Log, check that out because I kind of lay the groundwork of what we're doing here. And with that, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a tax professional quite like you, and you've never met a CPA quite like me. You have a great one, and thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you.